The crystal-clear water turned crimson as Karen's screams pierced the tropical silence. What started as a perfect afternoon by her luxury pool became a nightmare when an enraged primate launched itself from the palm trees above. But this wasn't just any monkey, and Karen's dark secret was about to claw its way to the surface. Sometimes karma has fangs, and today it was hungry for revenge. The sun blazed mercilessly over the Henderson estate, its rays dancing across the infinity pool's surface like scattered diamonds. Karen Henderson adjusted her designer sunglasses and took a long sip of her third mimosa, savoring the taste of Dom Perignon mixed with fresh orange juice. At 42, she still commanded attention in her barely there bikini, her surgically enhanced body bronzing to perfection under the Costa Rican sun. "Mrs. Henderson, would you like me to adjust the umbrella?" Maria, the newest addition to her household staff, hovered nervously at the pool's edge, her weathered hands clasped tightly in front of her uniform. Karen didn't bother looking up from her phone, where she was scrolling through envious comments on her latest Instagram post. "No, Maria, and stop lurking. It's creepy." The older woman's face flushed with embarrassment. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I was just checking if you needed anything." "What I need is for you to do your job without constantly bothering me," Karen snapped, finally lifting her gaze. "The pool deck needs cleaning, the guest rooms need fresh flowers, and my husband's study is a disaster. Figure it out." Maria nodded quickly and hurried toward the house, her worn sandals slapping against the marble tiles. Karen watched her go with satisfaction. These people needed to understand their place, especially here in her sanctuary. The Henderson compound sat on 50 acres of pristine rainforest, 30 minutes outside San Jose. Robert had bought it as their retirement retreat, but Karen saw it as her kingdom, a place where she could escape the judgment of their stuffy Connecticut neighbors and live exactly as she pleased. Here, surrounded by staff who depended on her generosity, she was untouchable. Her phone buzzed with a text from Robert. "Delayed in Miami another day. Client emergency. Enjoy the sun. Are perfect." Another day of blissful solitude. Karen slipped into the pool, the cool water a delicious contrast to the oppressive heat. She floated on her back, arms spread wide, feeling like a goddess in her aquatic temple. The sound of howler monkeys echoed from the distant tree line, but she'd grown accustomed to the jungle's symphony over the past 6 months. Mrs. Henderson. Carlos, the groundskeeper, appeared at the pool's edge, his face tight with concern. "We have problema English," Carlos. Karen interrupted sharply, not bothering to cover herself as she stood in the shallow end. "How many times do I have to tell you people? This is an American household." Carlos's jaw clenched, but he continued in heavily accented English. "The monkeys, Senora, they are very upset. The mama monkey, I don't care about some stupid monkey." "Drama," Karen cut him off. "Just keep them away from the house. That's what I pay you for." "But Senora, yesterday you told Miguel to I told Miguel to handle a problem, and he did. End of discussion." Karen's voice carried the sharp edge that had made her feared in Connecticut's social circles. "Now get out of my sight before I decide you're as useless as the rest of them." Carlos stared at her for a long moment, something dangerous flickering in his dark eyes. Then he turned and walked away without another word. Karen smirked and dove underwater, her perfectly styled hair streaming behind her like golden seaweed. When she surfaced, the jungle seemed quieter somehow, as if the very trees were holding their breath. She climbed onto her favorite floating lounger, a custom-made affair that had cost more than most people's cars. The sun felt different now, more intense, more purposeful. She closed her eyes and let herself drift. The mimosa making everything feel soft and dreamy. A strange chattering broke through her alcoholic haze. Karen opened one eye and saw movement in the palm trees overhanging the pool. Several dark shapes were moving through the branches, but she couldn't make them out clearly. "Carlos," she called out. "I thought I told you to deal with the monkey situation." No response. The estate felt unusually quiet. No sound of Maria's vacuum, no hedge trimmer from Carlos, no distant radio from the kitchen staff. Even the howler monkeys had gone silent. Karen sat up straighter, a flicker of unease penetrating her champagne confidence. The shapes in the trees were definitely closer now, and she could see eyes, dozens of them, staring down at her with unmistakable intelligence. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. They remember everything, Senora. Every cruelty has consequences. What the hell? Karen's voice cracked slightly as she looked around the empty pool area. Maria, anyone? The response was a sound that made her blood freeze a low, guttural shriek that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The trees above erupted with movement as a troop of howler monkeys swung into view, their massive forms blotting out the sun. But it was the smaller figure that made Karen's heart stop. Clinging to the alpha male's back was a tiny monkey, no bigger than a house cat, with a distinctive white patch over its left eye. A patch that Karen recognized with growing horror, the baby monkey she'd ordered Miguel to handle yesterday, the one that had been raiding her fruit trees and leaving droppings on her marble statues. The one she'd watched him carry away in a burlap sack while she sipped wine and laughed about pest control. But this baby monkey was supposed to be dead. The alpha male massive, scarred and radiating pure rage-locked eyes with Karen across the pool. In that moment, she understood with crystal clarity that this wasn't just about territory or food. This was personal. The mother's grief had called the tribe to war. Karen scrambled off the lounger, her movements clumsy with panic and alcohol. The water suddenly felt like quicksand. Every stroke toward the pool's edge and eternity as the monkeys above began their descent. She reached the marble steps, just as the first shriek split the air, a sound of pure maternal fury that had been building since yesterday's unspeakable loss. Karen looked up to see the mother monkey launching herself from the highest branch, her powerful limbs extended, her face twisted with an all-too-human expression of vengeance. In that frozen moment before impact, as the crystal water began to turn red and her screams joined the jungle's ancient chorus of justice, Karen Henderson finally understood the true meaning of consequence. The monkey landed with the force of divine retribution, and the predator became prey. The impact sent Karen tumbling backward into the deep end, chlorinated water rushing into her lungs as razor-sharp claws raked across her shoulders. The mother monkey, a spider monkey with lean, powerful limbs, clung to her like a living nightmare, her small hands surprisingly strong as they tangled in Karen's bleached hair. "Get off me," Karen screamed, thrashing wildly as she fought to keep her head above water. Blood streamed from the gouges on her back, turning the pristine pool into a pink swirl of chaos. The mother monkey shrieked again, a sound that seemed to tear the very air apart, and Karen saw something that made her blood run cold. The baby monkey, the one she'd thought was dead, clung to its mother's back, very much alive but bearing obvious signs of trauma. Its left leg hung at an unnatural angle, and patches of fur were missing from its tiny frame. "Oh, God!" Karen gasped, finally understanding. Miguel hadn't killed the baby. He'd hurt it badly, but something had gone wrong. Or maybe, she realized with growing horror, something had gone right. The alpha male dropped from the trees with a thunderous splash, followed by 6 more adults. The pool deck erupted in chaos as the troop surrounded the water, their territorial calls echoing off the marble and glass of the estate. Karen found herself trapped in the center of a living whirlpool of fury. "Help!" she screamed. "Toward the house!" But her voice was lost in the cacophony of primate rage. "Maria, Carlos. Someone, help me!" The mother monkey's grip tightened, and Karen felt herself being dragged under. Panic gave her strength she didn't know she possessed. She managed to grab the monkey's arm and throw her off, but the reprieve lasted only seconds. Before another adult male entered the water from the opposite side, Karen's expensive lounger floated nearby, and she lunged for it, using it as a barrier between herself and her attackers. The monkeys circled her like sharks, their dark eyes filled with intelligence and purpose that was more terrifying than any mindless animal rage. "I'm sorry," Karen sobbed, her perfect makeup streaming down her face in black rivulets. "Mignet was just trying to protect my property." The mother monkey tilted her head at Karen's words, and for one heart-stopping moment, Karen thought she saw understanding there. Then the creature opened her mouth and let out a sound that was unmistakably laughticled, bitter, and utterly human in its mockery. A new voice cut through the chaos. "Senora Karen." The young groundskeeper's assistant looked like he'd seen a ghost witch. Karen realized he probably thought he had. "Miguel," Karen gasped, paddling frantically toward him. "Help me! Get them away!" But Miguel didn't move. He stood frozen at the pool's edge, staring at the baby monkey with an expression of pure horror. "She's supposed to be dead," he whispered. In Spanish, "I left her in the forest. She wasn't moving." "Well, she's obviously alive," Karen screamed. "Now do something!" The mother monkey's attention shifted to Miguel, and her shriek took on a different quality, personal, accusatory. She began moving toward the pool's edge where he stood, her movements deliberate and predatory. Miguel stumbled backward. "I didn't." "Want to hurt her?" he said, his voice breaking. "You said to handle the problem, but I couldn't time not to kill her, Senora. I just left her where I thought she would die naturally." "You failed," Karen snarled, her fear transforming into rage. "I paid you to solve a problem, and you created a bigger one." "I have children," Miguel shot back, tears streaming down his face. "I couldn't kill a baby, even for you." The alpha male had heard enough. With a roar that shook the windows of the estate, he launched himself at Miguel. The young man tried to run, but 20 feet of muscle and fury caught him before he'd taken 3 steps. They crashed into the marble planters lining the pool deck, expensive orchids, and soil exploding in all directions. Karen used the distraction to swim toward the shallow end, but the mother monkey intercepted her, landing on her back with the precision of a trained acrobat. This time, the claws found their mark across Karen's face, 3 parallel lines from her left temple to her jaw. My face was to grab a fistful of Karen's hair and slam her head toward the pool's edge. Karen managed to get her hands up just in time to prevent her skull from cracking against the marble, but the impact sent stars exploding across her vision. Through the haze of pain and panic, she became aware of new voices, human voices. In rapid Spanish, Carlos appeared with 3 other men, all carrying makeshift weapons. But instead of rushing to Karen's aid, they formed a circle around the chaos, watching with expressions that ranged from satisfaction to outright glee. "Carlos," Karen gasped, blood streaming from her nose. "Help me." The older man's weathered face was stone. "You want to know about problems, Senora? Let me tell you about problems." He pulled out his phone and showed her a video. Even through her panic, Karen could see it clearly. Miguel in the forest, tears streaming down his face as he placed the baby monkey under a pile of leaves. The tiny creature was barely breathing, its leg twisted from some impact, its small body shivering with shock and pain. "Miguel came to me," Carlos continued, his voice deadly calm. "He told me what you made him do. We went back to find her, to try to help, but she was gone. We thought she was dead." The mother monkey had stopped attacking, as if she understood Carlos's words. She sat on Karen's back, her weight keeping the woman pinned in the shallow water, her dark eyes fixed on the phone screen. "But her family found her first," Carlos went on. "They brought her home, fed her, cared for her, nursed her back to health, and they waited." Karen's mind reeled. "Forest," Carlos spat. "These animals have been here for thousands of years. They remember, they mourn, they protect their own." The alpha male finished with Miguel and turned his attention back to Karen. The young man lay motionless by the shattered planters, his breathing shallow but steady, alive but unconscious. "I'll pay you, all of you, whatever you want. Just make them stop." Carlos exchanged glances with his companions. One of them, a man Karen had fired just last week for being too slow, stepped forward. "You want to make a deal, Senora?" he asked, his English heavily accented but clear. "Then let's talk about what you owe." The mother monkey chittered softly, and the baby miracle of miracles responded with a weak but audible call. Karen watched in fascination and horror as the tiny creature was passed from mother to aunt to grandmother, the entire troop inspecting the infant with gentle, careful hands. "She live," Carlos said, following Karen's gaze, "but she'll never be the same. That leg will never heal properly. She'll always be vulnerable, always need extra care." Karen's throat constricted. "I didn't know. You didn't care," Carlos corrected. "And now you'll learn what it feels like to be helpless." The alpha male approached the pool's edge, his massive frame casting a shadow over Karen's prone form, but instead of attacking again, he simply sat down and waited. His intelligent eyes never leaving her face, Karen realized with dawning horror that this wasn't the end of her punishment. It was just the beginning. Karen remained pinned in the shallow end, the mother monkey's weight a constant reminder of her helplessness. Her shoulders burned from the claw marks, and her face throbbed where the scratches had begun to swell. But it was the waiting deliberate, calculated, waiting that truly terrified her. The monkeys had settled into a loose circle around the pool, grooming each other with casual indifference while keeping their eyes on their prize. It was disturbingly civilized, like a jury deliberating her fate. Carlos and his men had disappeared into the house 20 minutes ago, and Karen could hear them moving through her private space's opening drawers, shuffling papers, making phone calls in rapid Spanish. The violation of her sanctuary felt almost as raw as the physical wounds. "What do you want?" Karen finally croaked, her voice hoarse from screaming. The chlorine was making her throat raw, and her lips were starting to crack from the sun. The alpha male tilted his massive head, studying her with those unsettling, intelligent eyes. The baby monkey clung to her grandmother now, making soft sounds that could have been comfort or pain. Karen couldn't tell which. "Please," she whispered, "I'm sorry I made a mistake." The mother monkey's grip tightened in her hair, and Karen bit back a cry. These creatures understood far more than she'd ever imagined possible. They were waiting for something, but what? Her phone, somehow still functional despite its dunking, buzzed on the pool deck where she'd dropped it. The alpha male moved with surprising grace, plucking it from the marble with one long finger and holding it up to examine the screen. The contact name was visible: Robert Husband. Karen's blood went cold. "No," she breathed. "Don't." But the monkey was already manipulating the phone with startling dexterity, his fingers dancing across the screen. Karen watched in horror as he found her video messages and began scrolling through them. "Stop!" she screamed, thrashing against the mother monkey's hold. "Those are private." The alpha paused on a video from 3 days ago, Karen laughing as she described her pest control solutions to her friend Melissa back in Connecticut. The audio was clear. ... So I told the little Mexican boy to just get rid of them. However he wants to do it, I don't care. I can't have monkeys ruining my Instagram photos. The reaction was immediate and visceral. The entire troop erupted in agitated chatter, their voices rising in what could only be described as outrage. The mother monkey's claws dug deeper into Karen's scalp, and the alpha male's lips pulled back to reveal teeth that could easily tear through flesh. "I was joking," Karen sobbed. "It was just talk. I wasn't serious." But even as she said it, she knew it was a lie. She had been serious, deadly serious, and now that casual cruelty was literally coming back to bite her. Carlos reappeared with a manila folder in his hands, his expression grim. "Mrs. Henderson, we need to discuss your employment practices. Let me out of this pool first," Karen demanded, trying to summon her old authority. "This is insane. I'm being held hostage by animals. Animals." Carlos's voice was dangerously quiet, like the way you treat your staff. He opened the folder and began reading from a document. Miguel Vasquez, terminated without cause after requesting time off for his daughter's surgery, reason given, reliability issues. Maria Santos, salary reduced by 40% for excessive emotional displays after her husband's death. Carmen Rodriguez, dismissed for insubordination after asking for basic safety equipment. Karen's stomach dropped. "Those are private personnel files." "You can't, Jose Morales," Carlos continued, his voice growing stronger. "Fired for theft when he ate food that was about to be thrown away. Ana Gutierrez, terminated for inappropriate behavior after refusing your husband's advances." "Should I continue?" The blood drained from Karen's face. "You're making this up. Your computer password is XYN123, Carlos said with contempt. "Not exactly Fort Knox security. We found everything: emails, financial records, even your private messages about the help." He pulled out his phone and began reading from the screen. Quote, "These people are like children. They need firm boundaries or they'll walk all over. I fired half the staff this month just to keep the rest in line. Fear is the only language they understand." The mother monkey made a sound that was unmistakably a growl. Her baby responded with a weak cry, and Karen saw the tiny creature's leg twitch as if in remembered pain. "You have destroyed lives, Carlos. Continued families. Children went hungry because you decided someone looked at you wrong. Old people lost their homes because you wanted to feel powerful. Their employees," Karen protested. "I have a right to manage my staff." "Staff?" Carlos laughed bitterly. You mean the people who clean your messes, cook your food, tend your garden? The people who make your comfortable life possible while you treat them like dirt? He gestured. To the monkeys surrounding the pool, these animals have more honor than you. They protect their families, they care for their young, they remember kindness, and they punish cruelty. As if responding to his words, the alpha male stood and walked to the pool's edge. He crouched down until his face was level with Karen's, his dark eyes boring into hers with unmistakable intelligence. "What does he want?" Karen whispered. "Justice," Carlos replied. "The same thing we all want." The alpha male reached into the water and gently touched the baby monkey's injured leg. The tiny creature whimpered, and its mother's grip tightened protectively around Karen's throat. "You have a choice, Mrs. Henderson," Carlos said. "You can face the consequences of your actions here, with us, or we can call the authorities and let them sort through your immigration violations, labor law violations, and tax evasion." Karen's eyes widened. "You can't prove your own files, prove everything," Carlos interrupted. "Payments to officials, unreported income, threats against workers who might testify. You've been sloppy, arrogant, and now you're trapped. The baby?" Monkey made another sound stronger, this time more defiant. Its tiny fist clenched as it tried to move its injured leg, and Karen saw something in its eyes that made her soul shrivel. Recognition. The baby monkey remembered her face from that day when she'd pointed at it and sealed its fate with a casual wave of her manicured hand. "What do you want from me?" Karen asked, her voice barely a whisper. Carlos smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Everything you've taken from us, every dignity you've stolen, every night's sleep you've cost with your cruelty." He knelt beside the pool, his weathered face inches from hers. "But mostly, we want you to understand what helplessness feels like. What it's like to depend on the mercy of someone who has none." The alpha male made a sound not quite a roar. The entire troop responded. They began moving closer to the pool, their coordination perfect, their intent unmistakable. Karen looked around at the circle of faces, human and primate, and saw the same expression in every pair of eyes. It was her turn to be prey, and unlike the baby monkey, she wouldn't be finding any mercy in this jungle. The sun had begun its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and crimson that reflected ominously in the pool water. Karen's skin was lobster red from hours of exposure, her lips cracked and bleeding. Dehydration was setting in, making her thoughts fuzzy and desperate. "Please," she whispered for the 100th time, "I need water, food, I'm getting sick." The mother monkey had relaxed her grip slightly, but remained perched on Karen's back like a living anchor. The baby had been passed around the troop throughout the afternoon, each adult taking turns to examine its injuries and offer comfort. The tender care was a stark contrast to the cold calculation in their treatment of Karen. Carlos emerged from the house, carrying a pitcher of ice water and a glass. Karen's parched throat constricted at the sight, hope flaring in her chest. "Thank God," she gasped. "I thought you were going to let me die." "The day is young," Carlos replied coldly, but he knelt at the pool's edge and filled the glass. "You want water? Answer some questions first." "Anything?" Karen said immediately. "Just please," Miguel's daughter Carlos interrupted. "Sophia, she needed surgery for a heart defect. You fired him 3 days before the operation. Where? Did you think he would get the money?" Karen's mind raced. She remembered Miguel's tearful pleas, his broken English as he tried to explain about his sick child. She dismissed him without a second thought. Another sob story from the help. "I didn't know it was that serious, liar." Carlos held the glass just out of reach. "Maria showed you the medical reports. You laughed and said it wasn't your problem." The memory came flooding back, Maria's desperate face as she translated Miguel's words, the hospital documents in Spanish, that Karen had refused to look at. She'd been planning a spa weekend in San Jose and didn't want to deal with staff drama. "I was stressed," Karen tried weakly. "I had other things." The glass moved further away. "Ana Gutierrez, the woman you fired for inappropriate behavior. Tell me what really happened." Karen's stomach clenched. Anna had been young, pretty, and unfortunately present when Robert had too much to drink one evening. Karen had found them in the garden. Robert, pawing at the terrified girl while she tried to escape. Instead of confronting her husband, Karen had blamed the victim. She was encouraging him, Karen lied, flirting. I had to protect my marriage. Carlos's face darkened. Anna was 17 years old. She came to us after you fired her, crying, ashamed. She thought it was her fault. How was I supposed to know she was wearing her school uniform? Carlos snarled. She had textbooks in her bag. She was a child, and your husband is a predator, and you chose to punish her instead of him. The alpha male made a low, rumbling sound, and the entire troop shifted restlessly. The baby monkey began Kriana, thin, pitiful sound that seemed to echo Anna's tears. What happened to her? Karen asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. She killed herself, Carlos said simply, 2 weeks after you destroyed her reputation in the village. Drank pesticide behind her family's house. Her mother found her. The words hit Karen like a physical blow. She'd never even bothered to learn Anna's last name, had dismissed her from memory the moment she'd walked off the property. Now that faceless girl had a story, a family, a tragedy that Karen had authored with her cruelty. I didn't mean for that, Carlos said, his voice shaking with rage. You get nothing. He poured the entire glass of water onto the marble deck, where it splashed against the hot stone and began to evaporate. Karen let out a sob of despair, her tongue feeling like sandpaper in her mouth. But we're not unreasonable people, Carlos continued, refilling the glass. Unlike you, we believe in second chances. So here's what's going to happen. He pulled out a phone, not Karen's, but an older model with a cracked screen. You're going to call your bank. You're going to wire $50,000 to each of the families you've destroyed, starting with Anna's parents. I don't have that kind of liquid cash, Karen protested. My assets are tied up in the mother monkey's claws dug into her shoulders, drawing fresh blood. Karen screamed and thrashed, but the creature held firm. Your jewelry box alone has $200,000 in pieces you never wear, Carlos said. Calmly, your purse has credit cards with $100,000 limits. Don't lie to us. He held up a stack of papers. We found your financial statements, offshore accounts, investment portfolios, the trust fund your daddy set up. You're worth $12 million, and you destroyed people's lives over pennies. Karen stared at the documents, her mind reeling. They'd been more thorough than she'd given them credit for. These weren't simple laborers seeking random revenge. This was an organized reckoning. How did who are you people? Carlos smiled grimly. Carlos Mendoza, former professor of economics at Universidad de Costa Rica, lost my position because I refused to look the other way. When wealthy American donors demanded special treatment for their children, he gestured to the man beside him. Eduardo Rivera, formerly chief financial officer at Banco Nacional, fired for questioning suspicious transactions from accounts like yours. One by one, he introduced his companions. A former judge, a displaced teacher, a doctor who'd lost his license for treating the poor for free, all of them victims of a system that favored people like Karen, all of them with skills she'd never bothered to recognize. You think we're ignorant peasants, Carlos continued. You think we clean your toilets because we're too stupid for anything else. But we're here because people like you destroyed our real careers for not playing your games. The baby monkey had stopped crying and was watching Karen with those disturbingly intelligent eyes. Its tiny fist opened and closed repeatedly, as if it was trying to grasp something just out of reach. The monkey, Karen said suddenly, how did you know it would survive? We didn't, Carlos admitted. Miguel came to us in tears, terrified, that he'd killed an innocent creature to satisfy your cruelty. We went back to find the body, to give it a proper burial. But her family had already found her. He pointed to the alpha male. That's her grandfather. Spider monkeys live in complex social groups. They have languages, traditions, grief rituals. When we found them, they were holding a vigil. Karen looked at the massive monkey with new eyes. There was something almost human in his posture. The way he held himself with dignity, despite his rage. They let us approach, Carlos continued. Somehow, they understood we were trying to help. We've been bringing them food, medicine, trying to earn their trust, and when they were ready, they came here. For revenge, Karen whispered. For justice, Carlos corrected. There's a difference, though I don't expect you to understand it. The baby monkey made a soft sound, and its mother responded with gentle touches. The love between them was palpable, pure, and it made Karen's chest tight with something she couldn't name. What happens now? She asked. Carlos held up the phone. Again, now you start making calls. $50,000 to Anna's family, $25,000 to Miguel for his daughter's surgery. Compensation for every person you've wronged, plus interest for the suffering you've caused. And if I refuse, Carlos looked at the monkeys, then back at her. Then we leave you here with them. No food, no water, no help. And we see how long your cruelty lasts when you're the one who's helpless. The alpha male stood and walked to the pool's edge. He reached down and gently touched the baby monkey's head, then fixed Karen with a stare that seemed to see straight through to her rotten soul. In that moment, Karen understood that she wasn't just facing the consequences of her actions. She was facing the judgment of every innocent life she'd ever damaged, and the verdict was already in. Retry meth. The first call was to Karen's private banker in Switzerland. "Mrs. Henderson, what a pleasant surprise," came the cultured voice through the phone's speaker. "How may I assist you today?" Karen's hand trembled as she held the device, Carlos's steady gaze never leaving her face. The mother monkey had shifted position, allowing Karen to sit upright in the shallow water. But her claws remained poised at Karen's throat, a constant reminder of the precarious balance of power. "I need to make several transfers," Karen said, her voice hoarse. "Large amounts." "Today, of course, madame. What amounts are we discussing?" Karen looked at the list Carlos had handed her, 12 names, each with an amount beside it. The total made her stomach lurch. $600,000, split between multiple recipients. There was a pause. "Mrs. Henderson, that's quite a substantial sum. May I ask the nature of these transfers?" "Charitable donations," Karen said. "Quickly, local families in need." Carlos shook his head and pointed to the baby monkey, who was being fed small pieces of fruit by its grandmother. The tender scene was a stark contrast to the violence that had brought them all here. "Actually," Karen corrected, her voice breaking, "they're restitution payments for damages I've caused." Another pause, longer this time. "I see. Gant, you're certain about these transfers. Once processed, they cannot be reversed." Karen looked around at the faces surrounding her, human and primate alike. Each one carried the weight of her failures, her casual cruelties transformed into this moment of reckoning. "I'm certain," she whispered. The transfers took 4 minutes to complete. Each name on the list represented a life she'd damaged, a family she'd broken, a future she'd destroyed for the sake of her own convenience. As the banker read back the confirmation numbers, Karen felt something inside her chest crack and crumble. "The final transfer is complete, Mrs. Henderson. Is there anything else I can help you with today?" "No," Karen said, then paused. "Actually, yes, I need you to freeze my accounts. All of them." Carlos raised an eyebrow but said nothing. "I'm sorry, did you say freeze? For what duration? Until further notice?" I need time to think about what I've done with my life." The call ended, and Karen let the phone fall from her nerveless fingers. The silence that followed was broken only by the gentle sounds of the monkey family caring for their injured member. "Why?" Carlos asked quietly. Karen stared at the baby monkey, who was now attempting to use its injured leg, its family supporting and encouraging each attempt. "I killed a 17-year-old girl," Karen said, the words feeling like ground glass in her throat. "I didn't pull the trigger, didn't hand her the poison, but I killed her just the same." The mother monkey's grip loosened slightly, as if sensing the shift in Karen's demeanor. "I remember her now," Karen continued, tears streaming down her sunburned face. "Anna, she had this smile, so bright, so trusting. Even after what Robert did, even after I screamed at her and called her terrible things, she tried to apologize. To me, she thought it was her fault." Carlos nodded slowly. "She left a note. It said she was sorry for bringing shame to her family, for not being strong enough to resist temptation." "What temptation?" Karen sobbed. "She was a child. She was just trying to do her job. Her mother still has the note," Carlos said. "Maybe someday you can tell her what you just told me, that her daughter was innocent, that the shame belonged to someone else." The alpha male had been listening to their conversation with obvious interest. Now he moved closer to Karen, his massive frame casting a shadow over the water. But instead of menace, there was something else in his eyes. Not forgiveness, but his touch was gentle, almost tender, and Karen realized he was examining the damage his mate had done. "He's checking on you," Carlos said. "Wonder." In his voice, making sure you're not seriously hurt. "Why would he care?" Karen asked. "Because," Carlos replied, He understands the difference between justice and cruelty, something we humans often forget. The baby monkey made a small sound, and its mother immediately responded, climbing down from Karen's back to tend to her. Child, for the first time in hours, Karen was free to move, but she found herself reluctant to leave the water. The pool had become a strange sanctuary, a place where terrible truths had been spoken and terrible debts had been paid. What happens now? She asked. Carlos consulted his watch. Now you get medical attention. Those scratches need cleaning, and you're severely dehydrated. Then we need to discuss your future here. My future. Did you think money was the end of it? Carlos asked. Ana Gutierrez is still dead. Miguel's daughter still has a damaged heart. Your husband is still a predator, and you're still the woman who enabled him. Karen felt the weight of those words settle over her like a shroud. What do you want from me? We want you to understand what you've done. Really understand not just the facts, but the pain, the fear, the hopelessness. He gestured to the monkey family, who were now grooming each other in the fading light. They could have killed you today, Isley, but they chose not to. Do you know why? Karen shook her head. Because killing you wouldn't bring back their baby's health. It wouldn't undo the trauma, wouldn't heal the wounds, but making you face the consequences of your choices that might prevent the next tragedy. The mother monkey approached the pool's edge again, but this time she carried something in her hand. It was a small piece of Fruta mango slice, sweet and fresh. She held it out to Karen, who took it with trembling fingers. She's feeding me. She's showing you mercy, Carlos corrected. Something you never showed her child. Karen bit into the mango, its sweetness exploding across her parched tongue. She began to cry again, harder this time, as the full weight of her actions finally penetrated the armor of privilege and entitlement she'd worn for so long. I'm sorry, she whispered to the mother monkey. I'm so sorry. The creature tilted her head, studying Karen with those impossibly intelligent eyes. Then she reached out and touched Karen's hand, not with claws, but with gentle fingers that seemed to acknowledge the apology. Sorry isn't enough, Carlos said, but it's a start. As the sun set over the Costa Rican jungle, Karen Henderson sat in her blood-stained pool, surrounded by the victims of her cruelty, and finally began to understand what she had become. The reckoning was far from over, but for the first time in her adult life, Karen felt the possibility of redemption flickering like a small flame in the darkness of her soul. Whether that flame would grow or be extinguished depended entirely on what she chose to do. 3 months later, Karen barely recognized the woman who had floated in that pool, drunk on mimosas and her own perceived superiority. The face staring back at her from the cracked mirror in the village clinic bore little resemblance to the surgically enhanced socialite who had once graced Connecticut. Magazine covers, the scratches had healed into thin white scars that ran from her temple to her jaw, permanent reminders that she wore like a penance. Her bleached hair had grown out to reveal gray roots, and her hands, once manicured and soft, were now calloused from weeks of manual labor. Senora Karen, we're ready for you, called Dr. Ramirez, the village physician who had agreed to let her volunteer. Despite her complete lack of medical training, Karen set down the supplies. She'd been organizing and walked into the examination room, where a familiar figure sat on the paper-covered table. Miguel's 5-year-old daughter, Sophia, smiled shyly at her, her tiny hand pressed to the surgical scar on her chest. How are you feeling, Mia? Karen asked, in careful Spanish. She'd been taking lessons with Maria, who had somehow found it. In her heart to forgive the woman who had once treated her like furniture, her voice still weak, but filled with the resilience that seemed to characterize every child in this village. Papa says you helped pay for my new heart. Karen's throat tightened. Your papa is a good man. I'm sorry it took me so long to understand that. Miguel appeared in the doorway, his expression guarded but no longer hostile. The relationship between them remained fragile, built on apologies and tentative trust, rather than the fear and contempt that had defined their previous interactions. The surgery was successful, Dr. Ramirez announced, reviewing Sophia's chart. Full recovery expected. 6 months ago, she wouldn't have cared about the fate of one sick village child. Now, Sophia's recovery felt like a personal victory. Karen walked the familiar path back to her new Homa modest 2-room cottage that Carlos had helped her. Rent from a widow in the village, it was smaller than her Connecticut walk-in closet had been, but it felt more like home than any of her previous residences. The settlement from her divorce had been finalized last week. Robert, faced with evidence of his predatory behavior and financial improprieties, had agreed to an uncontested dissolution that left Karen with enough money to live modestly, while ensuring the bulk of their assets went to his victims and various charitable causes. She paused at the small shrine she'd built in her garden. Ana Gutierrez's school picture held the place of honor, surrounded by flowers that Karen replaced every few days. "Hello, Anna," she whispered, as she did each evening. "I talked to your mother today. She's doing better. The counseling is helping. She said to tell you that she's proud of the young woman you are becoming." The ritual felt inadequate, but it was all she knew how to do. Anna's mother had accepted her apology with grace that Karen didn't deserve, but forgiveness would be a long journey for both of them. A soft, chattering sound from the trees above made Karen look up. The spider monkey family had taken to visiting her cottage regularly. Now significantly healed, but still bearing a slight limp, swung down to a lower branch and studied Karen with those remarkably intelligent eyes. And while the little one would never be completely whole, she was thriving under her family's devoted care. "Hello, Paquega," Karen said softly. "How are you feeling today?" The baby chittered in response and tossed down a small mango, which Karen caught with a smile. The daily fruit offerings had become a tradition between them, a bridge, a cross-species built on mutual respect rather than dominance. The mother monkey appeared next, descending with fluid grace to examine Karen's face as she did every visit. The scarred woman submitted to the inspection patiently, understanding that she was being assessed not just for physical healing, but for something deeper. Apparently satisfied, the mother monkey reached into a small pouch she carried and produced something that made Karen's breath catch. It was a tiny woven bracelet made from jungle vines and colorful fibers, the kind of intricate handiwork that required not just intelligence, but genuine artistry with infinite care. The monkey tied the bracelet around Karen's scarred wrist, chattering softly as she worked. When she finished, she touched Karen's hand once, gently, before retreating to rejoin her family in the canopy. Karen stared at the bracelet through her tears, understanding its significance. It wasn't forgiveness that wasn't hers to claim, but it was acceptance, acknowledgement that she had changed, that the woman who had ordered the destruction of an innocent life was gone. Her phone buzzed with a text from Carlos, the education center groundbreaking is tomorrow at 10 a.m. You still planning to attend? Karen typed back, "Wouldn't miss it." The Ana Gutierrez Memorial Education Center was being built with funds from Karen's restitution payments, designed to provide free schooling and job training for village children. It wouldn't bring Anna back, but it might prevent other young people from facing similar desperation as night fell over the village. Karen sat on her small porch and reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The woman who had once measured her worth in designer handbags and social media likes now found meaning in small acts of service, teaching children to read, helping in the clinic, tending to the needs of people she had once dismissed as beneath. Her noticed that her phone rang, displaying a Connecticut area code she recognized. For a moment she considered ignoring it. Her old life felt like something that had happened to someone else. But curiosity won out. "Karen? Oh my God, is it really? You?" Melissa's voice was shrill with excitement. "I've been trying to reach you for months. What happened? You just disappeared." Karen closed her eyes, remembering the woman she'd been when she last spoke to this friend, gossiping about staff problems while planning spa weekends, complaining about the help while sipping champagne. "I found out who I really was," Karen said simply, "and I didn't like her very much." "What are you talking about? Are you having some kind of breakdown?" "Look, Richard and I are planning a trip to Costa Rica next month. We could swing by wherever you're hiding, and I'm not hiding, Melissa. I'm home." The silence on the other end stretched long enough that Karen wondered if the call had dropped. Finally, Melissa spoke again, her voice uncertain. "I don't understand. What about your life, your real life?" Karen looked up at the monkey family settling in for the night, listened to the gentle sounds of a village preparing for sleep, felt the weight of the bracelet on her wrist and the responsibility it represented. "This is my real life," she said. "Everything before was just pretending." She hung up before Melissa could respond and turned off the phone. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to serve rather than take, to heal rather than harm. The baby monkey would continue to grow stronger. Sophia would return to school with her repaired heart. The education center would rise from the ground, between taking up space and making a difference. The lesson had cost her everything she thought she wanted, but it had given her something infinitely more valuable. It had given her a soul worth saving. As the jungle settled into its nighttime rhythm around her, Karen touched the scars on her face and smiled. They were proof that justice, when it finally came, could transform even the most broken among us. The monkeys had taught her that mercy and accountability could coexist. That redemption wasn't about forgetting the past, but about building a better future from its ashes. In the end, Karen's reckoning hadn't destroyed her. It had set her free.